So now that you've seen the Welcome One app in action and we've studied the source code, let's go ahead and build it from scratch. In the File menu, I'm going to select New Project to create a new project. You may at that point see a Save dialog pop up if you've made any modifications to the previous app. And for the purpose of the next many examples and the next many lessons, we'll primarily be focused on console applications. So you can see in the Visual C# category under Windows, I have a console application option. The default name for a console application is Console Application 1. I'm going to name this Welcome 1 to match up with the example we just took a look at. And when you do that, it also, of course, renames the solution. I'm going to leave Created Directory for Solution checked, and I'm going to click OK. By the way, I'm going to once again create this in the default location for Visual Studio projects on my system. Now, when I click OK, it's going to go ahead and create a shell of a console application, and there are a number of things showing up in the code editor window here that are different from what I just showed you. First of all, you'll notice, by the way, that the file name is program.cs. That is the default name for the file that contains main in any app, any Windows app that you create. The file name can be changed simply by clicking on it and editing it to be whatever you want. So the way I did that was I simply edited it to be Welcome 1, and you can leave it as program.cs if you like as well. Notice that once I pressed enter, it says that I'm renaming a file. Would I also like to rename it throughout the whole project, basically? And the answer to that is yes. And when I do that, it changes my class name to the Welcome One as well. So even the IDE itself is maintaining the file names based on the class names inside of each file, even though that's not actually a requirement. Now, you'll also notice that wrapped around my class is a namespace called Welcome One. I deleted that on purpose from the original source code that was generated, because when you're dealing with just simple applications that contain only one class each, or even just a couple of classes each, and you're not making reusable source code, there's no need for the extra namespace declaration. So I actually deleted that from the code that I showed you previously. And in order to get rid of the extra level of indentation, if you hold the Shift key and press Tab, it'll take the entire chunk of highlighted code and move it to the left. If you just press Tab, it'll take the entire chunk of highlighted code and move it to the right. So Tab to indent and Shift Tab to outdent, if you will. Now, you'll also notice that by default, they give you a whole bunch of using directives, 4 of which I did not show you in my source code. I deleted all the ones that I was not using. I like to only keep around the ones that I actually use in the program, so that anybody who's looking at the source code knows that only those namespaces provide features that I use in a given app. So again, these using directives at lines 2 through 5 are unnecessary for this simple application, so I simply deleted them. Of course, I added in some comments, which I won't bother doing at the moment. At this point, what I want to do is just show you how to create the very simple application that we built. In my source code, I had defined it as a public class. Most classes that you create, especially reusable classes, will be public classes, but this program will work regardless of whether you say public or not. And many, if not most of the methods that you create will be public methods as well. Again, I had public in my source code, so I'll go ahead and put it into the generated source code here. For a simple app like this, if you make the class not be public and make the method not be public, it will still work. Now, the only line of code in our main method from the source code we just looked at was a console.writeLine statement. Now, as you start typing code, you'll see that you get this so-called IntelliSense window that pops up, and it's there to help you write code faster. So you see I typed CON, which is the beginning of the word console, and it narrowed right down to the specific class name that I need to use. Now, I can just hit the Tab key to fill that in, and when I type the dot that you saw in between console and WriteLine, what's now appearing in the IntelliSense menu is everything that's allowed to go to the right of that dot. So if I type a W, capital W, which is the first letter in the method named WriteLine, and I type an R, it's very rapidly narrowed me down to just the two items that I'm allowed to use in this context that start with capital W, lowercase r. Now, by convention, method names in .NET start with capital letters, and each subsequent word is capitalized as well. Some people refer to that as camel casing. And if I want, I can hit the tab key to complete this now. I can use the arrow keys to select up and down. Notice that once I select an item, it gives me a description of that item. So this is quick help right there in the code editor for you, which can be very handy as you learn about various capabilities. I'll hit the tab key. I can also double click actually the selected item to insert it. Then when I type the left parenthesis for the method that I'm about to call, you can see it pops open a tooltip, and it says to me that there's actually 19 different versions of this WriteLine method. That's what we call method overloading. And if you're coming from a programming language that does not allow it, what that means is you can have many different methods inside of a given class that all have exactly the same name, but different sets of parameters. And in this case, the one that it's showing me right now is a version of WriteLine that takes no arguments, an empty set of parentheses, and all it does is basically display a new line character to move the output cursor to the next line. The next thing that we're going to do is put in the string that we want to display. Welcome to Visual C#, or whatever you want to display. And we'll follow that with the right parenthesis and a semicolon to complete the statement. Now you'll notice that some auto formatting happened there for me in this case. Visual Studio by default does not put spaces inside of parentheses. That's something I like to do as a programmer, and I find that it makes my code a little bit more readable. Visual Studio allows you to configure those auto formatting settings through the Tools and Options dialog that's in the Tools menu. So at this point, we've completed the app, and if we want to run it, just to show you that it does indeed display some text at the command line, you can see Welcome to Visual C#, and I can close that window, and we've now completed the first application.